Hi, welcome back. We're now starting to take a look at your party. This will feature quite heavily over the next 2 days. No, I don't have to explain to you why that is. It's an opportunity of a lifetime, really, your party, for a lot of us who've been politically homeless for quite a long time. There's an opportunity to build a really socialist, democratic organization of and for the working class. A party that can hopefully present a viable alternative to the capitalist system and its destructive nature. However, to say that there are teething problems in the Your Party setup would be putting it mildly. There's divisions at the top, there's a lot of confusion about what's happening, there's a lack of democracy, some say, a lack of accountability, and today we're starting to look at some of those issues, not, I should say, because we want to poo-poo it, but quite the opposite. I think we all are united, all the speakers who are coming on today are united in wanting this to succeed. So we need to make sure it's going to be as democratic and as open as possible. So we're looking in the first slot now, we're looking at the launch conference in a bit more detail with Archie Woodrow, who has written about your party extensively, and the former South African MP Andrew Feinstein, who's also been involved in the negotiations that have led up to the Your Party being set up. The following slot then afterwards, we'll be talking with Salma Yaqub, Ken Loach and Max Shanley about the things we should learn from the defeat of the Corbyn leadership in the Labour Party. So we'll start now with Archie. Welcome, Archie. We want to talk quickly about the launch conference. Jeremy Corbyn has described this as the launch conference on November 29th and 30th as the most democratic this country has ever seen. Do you share this assessment? Is that what we can look forward to?
I'm much less optimistic. I mean, the difficulty is it's hard to know with any certainty because the full details are yet to be announced. The whole process has been completely opaque. So at this stage, they've released some details, but not actually the full process. And a lot of the question of to what extent it is or can be democratic will depend on a lot of those specific details that they've given no information about publicly so far. Even privately, talking to people plugged in behind the scenes, it's not particularly clear that anyone has a sense of the details. And the specific details they have announced don't give me a lot of confidence, particularly the fact that, well, for one thing, the fact they're trying to do this in 2 months. I mean, anyone who's really been involved in any kind of organising knows that running a meaningfully democratic exercise covering big questions when there's lots of divisions and lots of disagreements, doing it in the space of 2 months is very difficult if you're doing it in a group of like 100 people, let alone doing it for potentially hundreds of thousands of people. And they've announced that the foundational conference itself will have 13,000 people present at it. Just on even with the best will in the world, just on a practical level, trying to work out how to run a democratic process over the space of 2 days with 13,000 people, where you get where people even get a chance to meaningfully speak and have their voices heard, let alone getting any sense of consensus from it, let alone doing it in such a way that the terms of it are not just set by the organisers and there's a chance for the people involved to sort of set the agenda themselves. It's very difficult to imagine how that's going to work. And as I say, they've not actually released any of the details of how it's going to work. Or, I mean, one of the few details they have said is that there'll be 6,500 people on one day, 6,500 different people on the second day. Again, very difficult to see how that works in a meaningfully democratic way, because, what if they'd come to different conclusions on the different days? How do you have any sense of continuity between the deliberations from one day to the next? And that's even assuming, the team who are organising it are perfectly 100% efficient and well organised and impartial. And obviously, given all of the extensive problems, divisions, disagreements, public falling outs, etc., that have happened over the last few months, it's hard, I think, for anyone to have faith in the process being sort of run in a fair, impartial way. And what few details we have is that one of the person who basically is in charge of working out the details is one of the people, Carrie Murphy, who opinions on her vary, but she's someone who's quite controversial within the power struggles. So people won't. It's hard to assume it will be that people can have faith in it unless they know and trust her personally.
Andrew Feinstein, if I could bring you in now. Some people argue that there just wasn't enough time to do it democratically. There's no time to set up branches, a proper membership forum. So now we have to do it with a lottery system rather than have a democratically delegate system where branches and the members decide amongst themselves who should go to conference, and now will be done by lottery. Do you think that the time issue, is that a good enough reason for you?
What we're trying to do with the creation of a new party in this country is usher in a new type of politics, because I think the consensus is that our current politics are just not fit for purpose. I mean, what we're witnessing at the Labour Party conference, you clearly have a leadership who are out of touch even with their own membership, let alone the rest of the country, on so many obvious issues. The genocide in Gaza being, preeminent amongst them, the cost of living crisis, the cutbacks to benefits, etc., while defense spending soars. And if we're going to do that, it has to be a different sort of party, obviously. And I think that unless in the way the party is now created, it is transparent, accountable, and democratic, all we're going to do is create another political party. And I think key to creating a different kind of politics is that we ensure that communities are represented by people, ordinary people from their communities. This is probably a bit rich coming from a former MP, albeit in South Africa, but I don't believe in career politicians. I think that if we're going to have what is supposed to be a form of liberal representative democracy, then at least the people who represent us should be of us and should relate to us. At the moment, the sort of way that the thinking is going about the conference, it appears to me that democracy, transparency, and accountability are not at the forefront of that. And yeah, of course, they're the difficulties of timeframes, they're the difficulties of the fact that there are so many people who've indicated an interest in this, speaking to the desperate need for a new party and a new kind of politics. Which is why I like to refer to it as a movement party rather than just a party. But I do think that even if it takes longer, there is a real need to build democracy from the bottom up for this to have the impact it needs to have to fundamentally change the structures, the nature, and the functioning of British politics.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you think, is there some space to turn this around a bit, to try to inject the will of the members as much as possible? For example, the regional meetings, they're supposed to be happening before conference or within the month, within 1 month, we're going to have 20 regional meetings are being planned. Do you see any way for members to put their will forward there, or are they just going to be non-voting? I think that's being muted.
Yeah. I think it's really important that I state unequivocally that I don't actually know what's going on. I was part of what was called the original organizing committee, which was then disbanded around the issue of leadership. My only role at the moment is that I'm one of 3 custodians of the substantial amount of money that has been donated, and I can reassure everybody that money is totally secure, that it will be transferred to a legal registered entity conforming to the reasons for which it was handed over when that occurs. But I'm not aware of the sort of daily activities and intentions at the moment. my feeling is that unless there is time and the capacity to organize some sort of local structures, many of them exist already. We in Camden have something called the Camden People's Alliance, where we've drawn people from a variety of organizations and just individuals from across the borough. And there are many such structures. I've been speaking at probably on average 3 or 4 a week of these organizations across the country in the last few months. And I think it's really important that these sort of local entities have a say, not just in the conference itself, but also in the way in which the conference is put together. And I've been strongly encouraging people who are, enthusiastically and with energy coming to these meetings to write to Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, to send to the Your Party email address what they believe the conference should look like, how they believe it should be organized. And the one thing that I'm hearing across the country is they don't want some sort of crazy idea of some sort of lottery, where, as Archie described, you have one set of people coming through one day, another set of people coming through the second day, because what that suggests is it'll simply be a rubber stamping of what has already been agreed by somebody somewhere. And I really don't think that's an appropriate way to set up a movement party that is going to really change the fabric of British politics.
Archie, it's been said that the real democratic thing is that every member will be involved in the conference. And what's been meant by that is that you have an OMOV, one member, one vote, online vote at the end to ratify the documents. Do you think that is a meaningful way to include the membership?
Not by itself, no. I mean, there are things you can do with online systems that are worth doing and that can increase participation. But if it's just, the terms of the question have been set and you get a vote at the end, in practice, it just means that the people who've got big platforms and the people who control the mailing list have got the power. And we saw this in Momentum, that they promised this, wonderful new digital democracy that would empower everyone. But in practice, it just meant that the leadership faction that controls the mailing list and has access to all of the big celebrities can get their proposals endorsed, and then it'll just get voted through, and nobody else really has the. I mean, there've been various comments from people involved that there's supposed to be some wonderful online platform where there will be prospect for people to debate things and amend things and etc. etc. But that's also what they promised in Momentum and then never delivered. And again, even with such a platform, it's got its problems. But for it to be democratic in any way, it again depends a lot on the details of like who is able to submit amendments, who is able to vote on amendments. If you've got thousands of amendments coming through, what's the process for compositing amendments or prioritizing the agenda of conference, etc., etc. And without clarity and transparency on how those questions are being answered, you can't really assume it'll be meaningfully democratic in any way. And I mean, there is actually with the conference itself, I think there is possibly a flip side to it that they've not potentially thought through, which is that 13,000 is an enormous number. It also sort of undermines the argument for sortition, but the point of sortition is supposed to be the random system that you if you have a small random sample, it's representative of the members at large rather than representative just of the really sort of diehard head-banging active members. But you can do that with quite a small sample of only a few hundred sortitioned members. But with 13,000, especially if, I mean, we don't know yet what the membership figures are, but there are some rumours and some suggestions that given all of the public problems, that the membership sign-ups will be lower than expected. So 13,000 people may be a very significant proportion of the registered membership. And also, it won't be completely random because lots of people won't have either the time or the inclination to go to Liverpool for the conference. So to get 13,000 people who actually are available and want to go to the conference, it might not be representative, and it may end up overrepresenting the people who are more actively engaged, which are also likely, I think, to be the people who are more dissatisfied with the whole process. So again, I can't really see how it will be meaningfully democratic, but I can imagine a situation where you end up with a lot of discontented people at that conference, very unhappy about the process. So I can imagine a way that it doesn't go as smoothly as they hoped, even if it might not be able to sort of. The other part of it also is we've not even seen the documents yet that are supposed to be amended and debated. We've got less than 2 months until the conference. We've got no idea what the constitution, political statement, etc., are going to look like. So it's no time even for proper scrutiny of these things, even if there was a good process for amending them and so on.
Yeah, and we hear that James Schneider, who was supposed to write the constitution, or maybe has made a start, has resigned from the top of your party because of the factional struggles going on, etc. Andrew, then, I mean, looking forward, I mean, we all do want this to succeed, and you're saying you have spoken at lots of proto-branches, including you addressed our meeting in Sheffield, which had 200 people there, and they're continuing to coming. Even though there are these issues, people are desperate to get organized. People are desperate to make, take initiatives and move forward. How do you, in your vision, how would a real democratic, vibrant party, what could it do? What could it achieve? I'll give you one example now. For example, the Social Democratic Party of Germany in the 19th century was a real working class party. It's not anymore, but it was rooted in the working class. They had reading clubs, cycling clubs, film clubs. Well, there wasn't much filming with that, but culture clubs, where people actually got together and built up their own culture. Yeah. What's your vision of a really democratic and socialist party?
I mean, I think one needs to take elements of various examples, hopefully more recent than the 1940s. But also there is no prototype, because obviously the context in the UK is very different to anywhere else. I mean, I obviously come from a political tradition where, the ANC was always a very broad movement, and in that breadth created problems at some levels, especially after we came to office, but was very important in the initial partial victory over apartheid. The Belgian Workers' Party currently in Belgium is electorally very successful, has some very interesting ideas, even though, as I said, I don't think it's replicable in the UK in any way, but ideas like working intensively in communities, providing free legal clinics, free health clinics, before looking to run electorally in those areas. Ensuring that representatives of the party have to sign a pledge to local communities, have to give up a significant amount of what they earn as representatives, be it at local level or national level, to the movement, so that the sort of material incentives for running for office are reduced. Mm-hmm. So I think there are all of those sorts of things. I think what we really want is we want something where ordinary people from the grassroots can represent our communities at local council level and at national parliamentary level, and that they are pledged to be accountable to the local communities and can be recalled if they are not, where there is a real sense of grassroots democracy, where, I'm not one of those people who believes that leadership is unnecessary. Of course, leadership is necessary, and it's very important in modern politics. But at the same time, what we're experiencing in Britain today, which frankly is a bit of a shit show, is a consequence of top-down leadership-heavy politics. And we're seeing that even at this highly controlled Labour Party conference, where you have a dictatorial leader who also happens to be my MP, who thinks that he and the political operators around him should determine everything, even though they're deeply unpopular within the party and obviously very widely within the country, making him possibly the most unpopular prime minister in British history. We've got to subvert that. And we've got to ensure that there are connections between this entity that has this electoral focus and social movements. And that's why I like to refer to it as a movement party, because I think if we become obsessed by what I describe as parliamentarianism, which I understand very well, having been subject to it when I was a member of parliament, people in parliament tend to see parliament as the center of the universe. I don't believe that it is. I believe that our communities should be seen as the central focus, all of our communities. And I believe...
On this, sorry, comrade, we haven't got much time, but definitely workers' representatives on a workers' wage, I'd say, and accountability. Where do you think the program, just quickly towards the end now, the program of the new party, there's been some discussion, should it be left, should it be openly socialist, should it be anti-Zionist, or should we fudge some of those issues? Do you think we need a clear principled program for socialism, or is that too divisive?
I think what we need is very clear principles and values that underpin any program. I mean, the details of the program then have to be worked out. While I personally, if it was up to me, I would like a program that was avowedly socialist, that was avowedly internationalist, that was avowedly in pursuit of justice and equality at home and abroad, and peace in the world. This is obviously very vague and broad, but those would be the obvious things. But at the same time, I think if this movement party is going to have a meaningful impact electorally in Britain, then it has to be a broad church, and it has to be welcoming to the many. So we've got to find that quite difficult balance between having certain inviolate principles and values, while at the same time being welcoming to as large a group of people, a number of people, and diverse a group of people as possible.
And allowing free speech would certainly be one of the key elements of that.
Can I very quickly say something on that? Obviously, that's incredibly important, especially in a society that from number 10 Downing Street, from the state, is closing down the right to free speech, the right to free political thought and association, the right to protest. And I think we on the left must bear in mind that having differences, having debates isn't a problem. It's the essence of politics. And within broad principles and values that we've got to stick to, it's really important that we have debate and discussion, and that we don't see differences as something that need to be removed and excluded from such a process, but that we actually embrace them, because it's only by having meaningful debate, meaningful contestation of ideas, that we're going to come up with something that is appealing to the many in this country who are being totally marginalized and forgotten about by our political system.
Absolutely. Archie, in that context, what do you think about the proposed, well, it's a question of interpretation, isn't it, ban on double memberships? That has now changed, the formulation has changed a little bit. I know you support a party that allows differences and also platforms and factions. Do you think there's a chance of that happening? How do you interpret this ban?
I think it's quite worrying. And part of it also is just the vagueness of it. And I think in general, this whole process has been characterized by sloppiness on details. And the fact that they launched this with no, prior discussion or warning about it, launched it with a thing on the membership form that says you can't be a member of another party. Then a load of people point out, well, wait a minute, what does that even mean? Jeremy Corbyn's a member of the Islington Community Independents, who are in the process of registering with the Electoral Commission. Does that mean they're going to get banned? I think the Canary or someone asked Corbyn about it, and he said, oh, no, it only means nationally registered parties, which is not a very clear term, but I implies that it's national parties which are registered with the Electoral Commission. So it would, for instance, exclude the Green Party, exclude the Communist Party of Britain, but not exclude the Socialist Workers' Party, because that's not registered with the Electoral Commission. But why you'd want to exclude some, because even though lots of those parties are registered with the Electoral Commission but don't actually contest elections, And some of them have expressed their intention of joining the new party and have even been like the Transform, which was set up by various different groups. But people like Alan Gibbons, who's been on the national leadership of the sort of team behind your party, is also on the national leadership of Transform, which is a nationally registered party. So it's a big, I think they've now updated the wording of it to say you can't be a member of another national party, but it's fine if it's a local or community-based party. But obviously community-based doesn't really mean anything. I mean, maybe the Communist Party will come along and say, well, actually, we think the Communist Party is a community-based party because aren't we a community, etc. So A, it's kind of undefined and a bit meaningless. B, it just looks sloppy and inconsistent, as if they've not even thought it through and worked out exactly what they're doing. But I mean, whether it's ill-intentioned or just sloppy, it looks like in practice it's just a sort of license for the whoever's running things to have a reason to arbitrarily exclude factional opponents, because it's very unclear how it could be applied in a consistent way. And also, given the whole point of this party was to unify the left that has been fractured across God knows how many different parties, it seems very strange to have as something at the start of the foundational process rather than something to be decided at the conference and determined at the end of it. And I think it bodes very poorly for how democratic this is going to be.
Indeed, what the intention is, and it certainly looks a bit like that to us. Andrew, are you in favor of a party where different platforms are allowed, political organizations are allowed to participate, all the left to get into your party?
It would be very hypocritical of me not to agree, given that in Camden, we have had a very open and broad approach to this. We have people who are participating very actively in the Camden People's Alliance, who are members of, and even some who plan to stand under the banner of the Green Party and various other parties. We have people from a number of what I suppose we would describe as left formations involved in the organization, and I think it's created a very healthy environment. Of course, electorally, it raises questions and challenges, but what we are trying to do locally as well is we're trying to ensure that there's dialogue between parties who are broadly progressive in nature, because we obviously have limited resources, and we must ensure that we maximize those resources in attempting to achieve as many progressive at a local level councillors after the May 2026 local elections. And I think at a national level as well. And I think, again, the problems arise when we focus on individuals, on personalities, rather than on real political and community organizing. And so, yes, I am definitely a proponent of being more open to multiple platforms. And even if this entity lands up taking on more of the appearance of a movement than a party, I don't think that would be a bad thing at all.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, Archie. There is space to push. I think we have seen over the last few weeks and months that if enough people keep pushing, that perhaps we can still change things for the better, because we do really need this to work out. Thank you both. And we're going to continue the discussion on your party after a short break. Thank you.